Well, welcome everyone. My name is Frederick Winsness. I want to welcome everyone here to another NetHope Solutions Center webinar. Today we have a webinar with the Crisis Informatics team and CARE and CARE's ScaleX Design Accelerator. We're very excited to hear about this innovative program at CARE, and we'll get the speakers presenting very shortly. Just want to quickly go over our housekeeping rules. We do want to make this as interactive as possible, so please open the chat window in WebEx and line up your questions there, and we will facilitate a Q&A session towards the end of the hour. And we are recording this as always, and we'll be posting both the recording as well as the collateral on the NetHope Solutions Center, and I will point everybody to that page during the session today, and look for that in the chat window. And we'll send an email out with those links as well. And at the very end of the session, when you close down your WebEx window, you will be presented with a webinar satisfaction poll, and we certainly would appreciate you answering those questions so we can improve this session or these sessions over time, and also contact you in case you should want to be contacted by either NetHope or the presenters today. And with that, I'm going to introduce Gabrielle Allman. She is with the Crisis Informatics team at NetHope, and she'll have the honors of introducing the speakers. So, Gabrielle?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Frederick. Greetings to everyone who's tuning in today or perhaps watching the recording later. I am Gabby. I'm part of the Crisis Informatics team at NetHope. Within NetHope, Crisis Informatics has two functions. One is we help to collect, manage, and visualize NetHope's operational information. But even more excitingly, what we do is we promote the sharing of best practices and emerging knowledge between our consortium members. So that includes NGOs and tech partners as well. Today, we're really excited to co-host this webinar looking at CARE's Accelerator program. So what I want to do right now is introduce our speakers. So first, we have Savannah Miller. She is the Program Manager for Design and Innovation, which includes developing and running lab curriculum and innovation workshops. Also coaching accelerator teams, planning ScaleX Design Keystone events, such as the ScaleX Design Challenge, and general operations for the ScaleX Design Accelerator. Savannah's previous expertise has been in business development for emerging economics, with a particular focus on agriculture and small and medium-scale enterprises. Prior to joining CARE, Savannah worked with Factor Ventures, a venture accelerator focused on tech for the developing world, and B Energy, a waste-to-biofuel cooking system and social enterprise based in Ethiopia. Additionally, Savannah has been part of several startup ventures and has a passion for facilitating innovations from project to scale. Also joining us later will be Whitney Piles-Adams, who serves as the Director of CARE's ScaleX Design Accelerator, which is a program that accelerates the accelerator methodology to traditional development and humanitarian aid programs. Rather than focusing on early stage innovation, the accelerator focuses on moving promising pilots to scale. In addition to overseeing the program for CARE's participating teams, Whitney works to establish new partnerships and bring in key resources and mentors to the ScaleX design community. So with that, we're about to get started and hand this over to Savannah. But as Frederick mentioned, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat window. Savannah will be presenting. And then after she's done, we will go through all the questions and give Savannah and Whitney a chance to answer them. So with that, Savannah, over to you.
Great. Happy Thursday, everyone. As Gabby said, my name is Savannah Miller, and I am the Program Manager for Scale by Design. I'm really honored to be with you today to introduce Whitney and I's program, the Scale by Design Accelerator, and then hopefully we can have a lively discussion on the wicked problem of scale. So first off, more on the wicked problem of scale. In 2012, the Ministry of Health in Uganda imposed an unprecedented restriction, no new mHealth or mobile health pilots would be allowed. That's basically saying no thank you to one of the biggest areas of innovation in this field. A lot of you might be pretty familiar with this story and this map if you can read it. If you squint, you can count 35 different mHealth pilots happening simultaneously. But a review of mHealth initiatives revealed that most failed to continue after the pilot phase. So the thing is, it's easy to make this map of mHealth activities, but it's much harder, almost impossible, to make a map of all the different global development projects, whether they're tech-focused or not, and quantify how many continue past the pilot phase. So the ICT for D movement is helping unearth patterns that was really already there, and that tells us just a story we already know. The global humanitarian aid and development industry has a real problem with taking innovation fully to scale. And unfortunately, this problem of pilotitis, as we like to call it, is only getting worse. As the number of international development donors and actors have drastically increased, project size and duration have actually decreased. So the number of projects increased nearly 5-fold from 1996 until 2006, but the average size fell from 3.2 to 1.6 million, leading the Brookings Institute researchers who conducted the study to conclude that the increase in total official development assistance has come about by adding many small new projects rather than actually scaling up what works. So even when solutions do scale, we realize that they move really slow, and we see this as at CARE as well. So we are enormously proud of the global impact that CARE has had through the Village Savings and Loans methodology and model, which is now in over 45 countries. However, we originated this methodology in 1991, and a couple years back we celebrated its 25th anniversary. And so through those global scales and audacious goal, 25 years is a very long time for great solutions to reach scale, and we really wanted to critically examine whether we could do better. So we began to ask ourselves, what do other sectors know about speeding the pace of innovation, and could we adapt or adopt anything that they were doing? So we began to explore accelerator and incubator programs and models, assuming that we would find one of these that would work maybe with our staff, or find some curriculum and materials that had already been adapted for the aid and development sector. But while we found a large number of programs targeting social enterprises, we didn't really find anything that was appropriate for NGOs, particularly NGOs the size of CARE. So that's when we realized we either had a much better idea on our hands than we had originally thought, or maybe a terrible one. So we launched an experiment to find out which one of those it was. Now, that experiment turned into Scale by Design. So what is the difference between the accelerator we built and others out there? Well, first, Scale by Design is focused on development solutions. So it's not exclusively focused on social enterprise or solutions that have the potential to generate revenue. It's not just focused on tech solutions either. So instead, we've created a program that applies private sector practices like rapid prototyping and iteration to very traditional philanthropic programs. Second, accelerators focus on entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. But if you need a decidedly different set of skills to incubate a promising solution within a large NGO like CARE, or scale a solution with the government. So we needed a program that focused on practitioners as opposed to entrepreneurs, and one that acknowledges and addresses institutions. Third, many social enterprise accelerators are learning that Silicon Valley investment model, not surprisingly, doesn't work tremendously well outside of Silicon Valley. So instead of just looking for unicorns within CARE, we are actually focused on taking each solution and focusing on tackling their next big barrier to scale and then supporting them to do that. And finally, we're not focused on finding just shiny ideas. So like the Ministry of Health in Uganda, we realized it's easier to find examples of creative new approaches than it is to find examples of actual scaled solutions. So we are choosing to tackle the gap between innovation and impact that already exists. Sorry, my slides are a little sticky today. So practically, how does this work? This is our accelerator timeline. And we have the same theory of change as many other accelerators. So that is building skills and leveraging resources and creating a community actually leads to impact at scale. So as you can see here, we have first the core of our accelerator program is our curriculum. Teams go through a core curriculum of 4 labs: Mindsets for Innovation, which includes human-centered design, designing for scale, business model generation, and then finally pitching, which incorporates storytelling techniques. All of these labs are facilitated remotely via webinar, but they're designed for really active participation. We utilize the chat box a lot, we ask a lot of questions. A lot of times there are really awkward pauses to get people to engage more, but we find that that method really works well. And then after these core labs, teams actually come to the U.S. For a boot camp and pitch event where they utilize the skills they learned in the labs, and they get additional intensive support through workshops and in-person mentoring. And then finally, they compete through a pitch event for monetary prizes. And then after these events, they return to their home offices, and they get to choose from 1 to 2 more elective labs to take during our spring time, and that are based on their biggest barriers to scale. So they're directly addressing those needs. So, and then after the alumni graduate from our program, they're still eligible to continue participating in different elective labs that we run throughout the year. And they also have access for additional support through the program. And we continue to match teams with fundraising opportunities, pro bono support that comes in, and additional mentors on a case-by-case basis to really make sure that we're targeting those barriers to scale for each team as they evolve. Another way Scale by Design is different is that we focus on co-creation with our participants and with external partners. So these are just a cross-section of some of our partners, both our curriculum and our mentoring partners. And we have brought in a number of these external partners whose expertise we really admire, and we work with them to co-create curriculum that works for development practitioners specifically. And we also co-create and prototype and test all of our materials with participants. So we're really trying to practice what we preach in terms of some of our methodologies. And we're really pleased with this approach. We feel like we're able to bring in an outside perspective and challenge the participants' mindsets, but it's still done in a way that really speaks to their problems, their experience, and their context. So what has our response been so far? So we are currently midway through cohort 3, and we are completing outcome interviews with our newly graduated cohort 2 participants currently. But cohort 1 and early responses from cohort 2 have been very, very encouraging. We've seen a 100% change in mindsets among our teams and our participants, which is incredible, and a nearly 70% of teams have reported a significant scaling win within their first 6 months of the program, which we see as really quite significant, as those are kind of the barriers to scale that we really feel like tackling will lead to further scaling success. In cohort 2, we actually opened up Scale by Design to our peers. So in cohort 1, we were only comprised of internal care teams, but in cohort 2, we had Habitat for Humanity and WWF kind of join in on this experiment with us, and to see if our value would actually translate fully outside of just a care context. And thankfully, this experiment paid off. We've really seen terrific impacts in community by bringing in these outside peer teams. This year, we also have PACT as a team, and as well as WWF and Habitat returning to submit teams for Cohort 3. And so I think just even the fact that WWF and Habitat wanted to return and send new teams really shows that we're providing value, and that this isn't just a care-centric model and accelerator, and that we actually can see these same kind of results in other NGOs around our sector. So before we get into some questions, because I'd love to have a really engaging conversation, I'd like to introduce you to AlloWeather and give you all a face to what some of our teams look like. So in this picture is Jiang and Yongge, who were our team captains for the Cohort 2 team, AlloWeather. AlloWeather is a weather and agricultural forecasting application, so app on your phone, that is targeting rural farmers in Vietnam. Now, when they started, they were providing this kind of really critical weather and agriculture advice and expertise in forecasting to really isolated farmers, but in a very community-centric way, which was actually giving these farmers 21% more crop yields than others who weren't receiving this advice. So that's very significant for this kind of smallholder farmer that they were targeting as their customer segment. But they were using paper flyers and actual extension agents and people to disperse this information, which of course is really slow and costly. So that's kind of where they were at in the beginning of the Scale by Design process. And now through this process, they were able to transition and work on an app-based solution to tackle some of these key barriers that they had to scale. That included creating prototypes of their ICT innovation and testing the app's usability. They also worked on their business and financial models to discover that not only was social enterprise as a scaling path possible for them, but that they also would be profitable by year 2, which any of our attendees who has any familiarity with social enterprise or with startups in general is very, very impressive. So through this, they hope to reach 200,000 households, which accounts for 20% of farmer households total in the region of Vietnam, which they're working, which is really incredible and all in a very sustainable way. So that was a very quick rundown and a little case study, and I wanted to make sure to put this up here. So if you're interested in anything that I've just said, there are a couple ways you can get involved. First is reaching out to Whitney or I directly via the emails that are on your screen. And then second is you can follow our journey of all the different teams that we have from cohorts 1, 2, and 3 on the Scale by Design CARE website. That's SXDaccelerator.care.org. And we have updates on each of the teams on that website, as well as information about our events and our alumni teams, as well as current. So I'd love to open up to questions. And
wonderful.
Savannah. Go ahead, Gabby.
Yes. So thank you, Savannah. This has been incredibly insightful, and we have a few questions that we want to send your and Whitney's way. Let's get started with a few. When it comes to the partners that you engage outside of CARE that can take part in the Scale by Design Accelerator program, who is eligible to partner with you, and how can they apply or express their interest in taking part?
So just to clarify, or Whitney, was that you?
So I can answer if you want, or
go for it.
Okay, yeah, so in the first 2 years, we basically reached out to a couple of partners that we knew were tackling some similar ideas that had a couple donors in common, and who were kind of just a great opportunity to experiment with. So they came onto it kind of as a guinea pig with us. And even, for example, one of the staff that went through the first cohort, they moved on to Habitat for Humanity, which is right down the road from our headquarters. So it was really easy to bring on a team from there. So next year, we hope to have up to 5 external partners, and we do charge a small fee. So we have a program fee. That's around $1,500, and there you actually pay for your own expenses to come to travel expenses to come to boot camp. But it's a very intensive program, so most people feel that that's far undershooting what the service and the value that we're providing. So if you're interested in joining or submitting a team, go ahead and email us. We do have an application process, but it's not something that we put open on the web because we want to make sure that it's a good fit and it's really well aligned that will be able to really help kind of your organization or your team.
Wonderful.
We also have different cohort themes sometimes. So this year our cohort theme was women's economic empowerment. So we're not sure what the theme for cohort 4 will be quite yet.
Great. And then to what extent are the cohorts in person versus the collaboration and learning that takes place that's virtual?
So all of our core labs are virtual. We try to do as much virtual as possible just to accommodate all of our different staff globally. You know, this is a global accelerator program. So, you know, we don't want to be taking staff away from their projects for too long of a period of time because that's where they actually get the work done and where their projects are based. So all of our core labs are done virtually. Our boot camp and pitch events usually take up about 2 weeks, and that's all in person. It's a really intensive time, but it's also a really wonderful time to cement that community and to just accelerate the learning process going forward into elective labs, which are also virtual.
Great. Awesome. So I know that there are a few NGOs or very large agencies, humanitarian agencies, that are also starting their own accelerator programs. And I think there's a lot of interest from mid to smaller size NGOs that might want to do the same as well. From the process that you described at the beginning of how you looked at different models and started experimenting with your own model within CARE, do you have any advice for other humanitarian organizations that might want to start their own accelerator program?
Yeah, so a lot of the NGOs that are working on new accelerator programs are actually creating an accelerator that maybe supports local NGOs, local social enterprises. There aren't that many examples of ones that are actually working to incubate their own internal solutions or working with large international NGO solutions. So definitely, if you kind of want to start something along those lines, we'd love to, partner with you to expand, and so we don't have to recreate the wheel. There's certainly very few resources out there for work like this. So we're very open to kind of any partnerships ideas. We've been asked sometimes to expand to working with local social enterprises, and the litmus test that we just simply use is kind of the saturation of the market. So there are over 600, accelerators worldwide working in the private or social enterprise sector, and those kind of can vary to the degree at which they penetrate markets in different countries. So we would probably not go in and try to support any kind of local social enterprise or local NGO incubator or accelerator in maybe Kenya, but maybe in another country where there is nothing on the market, we might be interested in adapting our work there.
Great. I think we have 2 more questions, and then we might just come to a close early and give everyone just a few minutes back. But we have a couple of great questions still lingering out here. So from Kateri, if I pronounced her name right, she wonders, how do you position participants to combat common challenges with scaling programs, such as lack of resources, capital, and local skill?
Yeah, so I think one of our first, our positions is that scalable models are made, not born, that we often are not necessarily designing and creating scalable models from the beginning. As Savannah's example gave, we had a great impact in our original pilot, but it really wasn't designed for scale, right? So a lot of the work that we do is supporting teams to kind of redesign and create a scalable model, and then building all the skills and capacity they need for this kind of new science of scaling, and really this new 21st century as well, where all development aid workers are expected to be marketers, communicators, business leaders, right, designers. So we both do kind of the essence of the model and what that needs to go to scale, and then we're helping them build capacity a lot of times through the elective labs in areas that they feel are particularly challenging. When it comes to lack of resources, this is always going to remain like the biggest challenge for them, and then the big challenge for us to bring more resources to the table. What we have found is that, for example, our core lab on pitching, when they do the lab on pitching and then when they come and pitch in this competition, in a lot of ways that's a little bit silly, right? Nobody ever gets funding for a big scale development project by learning to pitch. But what it's really about is changing the way that they communicate and engage stakeholders. So one of our social enterprise teams, for example, has doubled their customers in the last year from 20,000 to 40,000. And they really cite the changes that they made in many elements of their business model, but also the way they kind of communicate and engage stakeholders for the ability to attract new partners and new customers. Others have said the same about it's changed the way they work even through traditional fundraising.
Thank you. We have another question that's come in that has multiple parts to it. So I'll read it out loud, and then maybe we can take the first part together. Several times in this brief presentation, you have cited positive results. A few questions. Can you describe how you are measuring results? What kind of evaluations have been done with what sorts of designs and methods? Do each of the projects have fully fleshed out M&E plans? And can you cite any negative results?
Great.
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, so we could do a whole separate session on our M&E challenges, our failures, and our current theory of change. But just to be candid, so we do operate on an incredibly shoestring budget, so we don't have a lot of money for monitoring and evaluation. The other challenge is there's no baseline to this, right? So we simply don't know how many projects fail to scale. As Savannah very well illustrated, you can create that map of Uganda with the in-health innovations, but we can't create a map of the world with how many development innovations are out there that just don't go anywhere past the pilot. We know kind of anecdotally from our own experience that it takes us 25 years, but we don't know what success might look like. So we might shorten the time it takes to scale to 10 years, and that might be wildly successful, and who will be around to care, right? So our theory of change is first around shifting mindsets, around creating scalable models, around that being some of the purpose of our work rather than to just simply fulfill the donor requirements and like create maybe locally sustainable results. We look around changing mindsets around how we design for scale and how we engage stakeholders in many of those different techniques. Thanks, great slide. So we look at first, we want to see within the first 6 months, like a drastic shift in mindsets from teams. We also then want to see them changing practices. We want to see them using human-centered design. We want to see them redesigning their models for scale, using some of the skills and techniques and tools that we've given them. The next kind of theory of change is that we would be working on practical barriers to scale. So we want to make sure within the first 6 months, all teams are tackling at least one barrier, and then within the year that they're tackling at least 3. So that could be, we need a business model to scale, or we need a marketing and communications plan. So looking at the multiple challenges that they face, like which ones were we able to tackle, and how far did they go with that? And then we look back, now that we've had cohort 1 be finished for a full year, we're able to look back and we basically categorize kind of which ones have failed to scale or are no longer implementing, which ones did scale by design actually just simply help them like find a runway and a bridge to continue. So nearly half of our teams from cohort 2 had some kind of funding from the process that just simply helped them kind of eke out an existence. So that's, something, a really hard truth within the development sector, that so much innovation, it just dies on the vine, right? So even though we have kind of lofty goals of impact and scale, sometimes we're just rescuing, right? And then we're looking at how many teams are kind of continuing to reach scale but haven't reached full scale yet. So that might be the example of this team who's doubled their customer base in Bangladesh. They've gone from 20 to 40,000. And then we look at teams who kind of have somehow, there's no perfect definition of scale in this, but have somehow reached scale. And we really rely on maybe their original definition of scaling goals to look at that. So is that, a particular geography that they had in mind that they wanted to scale up to? Is that institutionalization, maybe within a financial institution, or the government they've now handed over their work and it's scaling sustainably through that? Have they become like a widely accepted best practice, which will probably take, a lot more time than a year. So we're kind of looking at that, and we also look at, for all of these changes, we look at attribution to scale by design. So for mindset shifts that we're putting them through these intensive labs, we may be 100% responsible for these aha changes in behaviors and practices that they experience. On the other hand, when you get to kind of reaching full scale, that is kind of a wicked problem that has so many different elements. So we may be a part of that change, but circumstance, like the right funder or donor that just happened to come along, some smart moves the team's made, right? Like a very willing partner or stakeholder. Those are all factors kind of outside the control of the program. So we have people kind of rate whether or not, their attribution of their success is, 0 to 5%, 5 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 80 to 100. And now that's a very imperfect, way to try to quantify this, because one person's 60 to 80 might be another person's 20 to 40. On the other hand, I do think it really gives us a sense of where we have the most impact and how people are valuing the program and what type of impact it has on their work. Sorry, and a couple of other questions. So for each of the projects, do they have fully fleshed out M&E plans? Yes. So all of these projects are projects that have existing donor funding or had. A lot of them are at the end of their runway, or maybe have just wrapped up their funding or lost their funding. So they are in various stages again of some of them have intensive M&E and very high quality work. Some of them are shoestring projects. So kind of very typical of anything you might see in your organization and development. So we work with everyone. Being a year-long program, there is not often as much we can do on the M&E side, since M&E cycles are often much longer than a year, for example. But that is a particular area that we'd love to kind of continue building out support for all the teams in. And again, when we bring them into the Accelerator, we're usually looking at some result that they already have that we're excited about. So Can we cite any negative results of the accelerator? That's a good question. You know, I think we are often using these teams to guinea pig new ways of working and new ways of being an open platform as an NGO. So using pro bono mentors and volunteers, for example, you know, we've worked with top of the line companies that I won't name names that were, from the leadership perspective, extraordinarily excited to provide their services for free to us, and you know, have probably actually wasted the time of the teams and have not actually been that helpful or useful, haven't really delivered on the results that they would. So, you know, figuring out how we kind of bring in external partners to our work is a painful process. So, you know, in that it's, you know, maybe sometimes been frustrating for some of the teams to be the first guinea pigs for that. I could say that that's a negative result for some teams.
Great, and kind of on that point of partners and bringing people in, we have a question from Carly. It would be great to hear some examples of the co-creation you did with a couple of the partners, and speaking more to what kind of support they provided in the process.
Yeah, so we had a number of partners who were kind of founding partners with us. And so Grid Impact is a human-centered design firm. Unreasonable Institute, many of you may be familiar with, is a social enterprise accelerator that is globally focused, but based in Denver, Colorado. So we worked with them, for example, to kind of create our core curriculum. And that first year, they were the facilitators for that curriculum. And what we really did is we brought them as the experts on the subject matter, and we were the experts on our users, right? So we developed from kind of their more usual offerings, we developed new work, new curriculum, new tools and materials to specifically target NGO staff. After that, we've kind of taken these things over, and now we facilitate these core curriculum in-house. We have other partners like Medora Ventures. They have co-created our lean business planning and financial forecasting labs. They stay on to co-facilitate these labs, so we can facilitate them in-house or we can bring them in. But we also often use them as coaches and mentors for particular teams, so that the teams aren't just simply always hearing from us, and so that we keep injecting really kind of fresh and outside perspective. And then we have another partner here that many of you in the tech sector may be familiar with, Pivotal. So Pivotal is a for-profit company that works with many companies around the world to do lean software and tech development. And they use a very human-centered design and lean approach to their work and to teaching their clients these methods. So they are a great fit that after the teams go through our first lab on Mindsets for Innovation, those teams that are working with technology to scale might be matched with a partner and mentor from Pivotal who has seen the curriculum, that knows what they know, knows what they don't know, and works with them to kind of guide them on their development of their technology solution. We had, for example, a Pivotal staff person who was on kind of a volunteering vacation in Asia that came by our Philippines and Vietnam office to work with our Cohort 3 teams and led them through some additional deeper dive design workshops that built off of our the initial lab that we had done.
Pivotal was also the mentor for AlloWeather, and they helped a lot with some of the prototyping for their app, and I think really elevated that work and made it go much quicker than they otherwise would have been able to. So.
Whitney and Savannah, I have a follow-up question to this that came in around the concept at NetHope that we call collective impact. You create these cohorts with multiple partners, and then you kind of going after the same problem space or doing things in parallel. Using your methodology, to what extent do you see that people are, you know, picking up different aspects of the work and sharing with others and learning from each other's implementations, and by the nature of working together rather than stovepipe, which is quite typical in our industry, where people working together around a common problem space, it's easier for you to get to scale than otherwise?
Yeah, so people often kind of get excited about like the cohorts being able to do kind of peer-to-peer learning, and one of the things that we've found is that that can sometimes be a little bit more difficult, but really the best mentor that you could ever possibly have is someone who's just a few steps ahead of where you are now, right? And so what we have found has been really strong is the support between different teams that are at different stages to teams that are right behind them in that stage. So teams, especially teams that are working on new social enterprise models, we see a lot of similarity in the types of business models that happen. You can see, like there's a lot of great opportunities for more mature teams to mentor teams that are just beginning. There's also a lot of similarity and overlap, like, you know, for any team that has struggled with how to do pricing, right, or who's really struggled with how to create a, you know, a consultant pipeline or something to do training. You know, there's particular ways of working that you can identify what teams are struggling with and help put them with a mentor for someone who's farther down the road who solves that. We are also creating some, now that we're in year 3, we're creating additional working groups for the alumni. So we have a working group on like teams that are generating revenue in some sort to work on that. We do a lot of kind of mentoring with the technology pieces between teams, and then we're also interested in designing, like starting a design working group for teams to share practices.
That's terrific. It sounds like this cohort model that or the partnership model you're dealing with really could be the cure for this pilotitis that you were talking about before. Can you imagine, you know, 5, 10 years ago, when all of these mobile data collection pilots were out there, if all of those people could actually learn from each other real time, that might have solved a lot of problems that we saw cropping up.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say one of the things that we could use to bring this better together is a donor who wants to support a cohort on a more narrow topic, right? So right now, because we don't have, you know, a corporate sponsor that's interested in a particular topic, or maybe a foundation who really wants to hone in, and we have kind of a wide range of teams. So you see a lot of repetition in their models and their challenges that we can link with. But I agree, like if we had a sponsor for one particular challenge, we could also reach outside of CARE to get teams doing great work in those areas to kind of recruit them, and then have quite an impactful community of learning that way too.
Great. Well, this has been an incredible, exceptional presentation that I know has driven a lot of value and insight to all those that have attended. Frederick, I'm going to pivot to you to close us out.
Sounds great. Well, thank you very much, Savannah and Whitney. This is, as Gabby just mentioned, it's been super interesting. I wish you great luck with your future cohorts, and also excited to being able to harvest some of the learning that you've been providing over the years for this. If people, as they leave, could please take a look at that the webinar satisfaction poll, that would be very, very helpful. I also put Whitney and Savannah's email addresses and the link to the journey in the chat window, so if you want to capture that, you can do that. We will follow up with an email to everyone with the link to where you can find the recording and the collateral for this. So I want to thank the audience also for great questions, good interaction, and wish everybody a great rest of your day. We're going to give you back about 15 minutes or so. So thanks, everyone. We will be back in touch really soon with our next webinar program. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great day.